also share my screen, and hopefully now you can soon see it. But welcome to this webinar. In terms of introductions, my name is Sammeli Sammalkorpi. I'm CEO and co-founder at Sievo, and I must say I've been 20 years in this business in procurement analytics, spend analytics space, and I've never been as excited as I'm right now, because we are living through a big change in how data can be processed, how data can be analyzed, and of course GenAI has a big role in that. So I'm really eager to spend the next 60 minutes with you, hopefully not only having dialogue with my beloved colleague Sergey, but also addressing questions, comments you have. You can't speak, but you can use the chat window to ask any questions, comment, challenge us as well. So please do that. But with me, I have the one and only Sergey. So please go ahead.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sergey. I'm super excited to join Sammeli today. I'm one of the product managers in Sievo, heading our AI and machine learning lab and spend classification team. And 20 years ago, when Sammeli onboarded on procurement transformation journey, I was in elementary school, but I was already looking forward to disrupting this space. And now 2024, here we are. Somebody, would you like to walk us through the agenda?
I will do that with pleasure. So basically, yes, today we are speaking about GenAI, AI, machine learning, how they impact procurement. We are going to address it from two different angles. First, how the AI changes, let's say, data processing. And first, I'm going to give it a bit of, let's say, theory, and then Sergey will concretely explain how it happens. I got the easy part. I'm doing the hand waving and then the slides, and Sergey will show how it actually works. So that was not fair, but it's how it is. But secondly, and perhaps even more interestingly, point 3 and 4, we are going to describe how AI new technology can not only help us process data better, but how can we actually translate data to action. So that's what we are covering today. Are we ready, Sergey?
We are. Let's get it started.
Yes, we will. First, now that I have your attention, not everybody knows Sievo. So very brief Sievo introduction, only 2 slides, I promise. Sievo is in the business of procurement analytics, so helping our customers transform dirty procurement data, whether that's in your ERPs, that vendor master data, material master data, or whether it's outside your organization, market prices, risk information, so forth. We capture that and we translate data to better decisions. That's basically the business where we've been for the last 20 years. We started with spend and savings, and that's still core part of our value prop. But nowadays, it's much wider sort of perspective, addressing risk, sustainability, carbon, diversity, any aspect procurement functions are actually sort of trying to address. On the bottom left-hand side, I have got a small screenshot. That's what people think Sievo is, and I have here. But this is not really what analytics is about. Analytics is not about dashboards. We'll get back to that later on. So forget about that picture. This is here to tease your thought process. Is this analytics? That's not analytics. Or that's at least not the full story about analytics. I'm not going to use a lot of time here. We have also a lot of our customers in this call. Thank you for joining. We also have a lot of prospects. The point is we serve some of the largest companies in the world, with most complex ERP landscapes and so forth. As of today, actually, more than 1% of global GDP goes through our analytics. Think about that. More than 1% of global GDP is being analyzed by Sievo as of today. It's been 20 years, but we've gotten something. With this pace, it takes us, let me think, it takes us 2,000 years to process the entire GDP of the world. I'm not sure if I will live until that, but I'm pretty sure Sergey will, because he's so much younger. But that's where we are. Wim, thanks for a question. We will be addressing that a bit later on. The procurement data challenge and opportunity. Let's take a deep dive on that. Now, this is one of my favorite slides to share with procurement audience, because I think this is important, and I'm not sure if all procurement people have yet thought it from this point of view. But now data is the new oil. Data is the most valuable asset on the planet right now. And if you think companies, they have two key interfaces between the company and the outside ecosystem. You have the sales and marketing, which faces with the downstream ecosystem, and then you have procurement, which faces the upstream ecosystem. And now most of the data is not your own data. It's not something that's in your company, but it's an outside ecosystem. So I really do believe procurement is well positioned to be a key information boundary between company and upstream ecosystem. I do believe procurement should look at themselves as a data boundary to capture and process data around suppliers, commodities, innovation, regulation setup, bring that information back to company, process that information and share it with the rest of the organization to create a competitive advantage. And if you believe data is the new oil, then procurement, we are sitting on top of, let's say, oil field. We just need to capture that data and process that data, and that will create a competitive advantage. So don't look procurement as only creating savings or cost reduction. Look at procurement as information boundary between company and outside ecosystem. And of course, when you look at that, I don't need to preach this to you. The requirements for procurement have changed quite a bit. 20 years ago, it was only around spend savings for the CFO, value for the shareholders. But the world has changed. There's much more requirements and demand for procurement, sustainability, diversity, carbon, and risk, and so forth. And what I believe most of large enterprises have realized in the past, the thinking was only about that most of the costs are influenced by procurement. What I think most of large enterprises have realized that 60 to 80% of everything is influenced by procurement. If you look at the carbon reduction, for most companies, most of the carbon is embedded in purchases, goods and services purchased. Most of the supply chain risk or risk is with the supply chain. Most of the innovation can be captured from there. Most of the diversity data is from there. So basically, this is a great opportunity and challenge for procurement functions. It challenges in the way that, okay, there's much more requirements, but there's not much more resources. There's a recent study saying that the procurement work demand will increase by 8% because of these requirements, but at the same time, procurement is only given 1.4% more resources. So increase in requirements, but not increase in the resources. How do we close this gap? And of course, data and analytics is part of the response. But when I look at our customers and prospects, I think there are going to be procurement functions who grasp this opportunity and really become this information boundary, collect the data, process the data, and create a competitive advantage for their organizations. I don't believe all procurement functions will succeed in this. And the reason is that there's quite a few new challenges. Some of that is around data. There's a rapidly changing regulatory setup. There's a challenge on how do you capture and process new data sets. And those are going to be the focus of our webinar today. But then at the same time, there's this new stakeholders, sustainability people, and so forth. Not all procurement functions will be able to kind of create those relationships. I hope and want many of you to succeed, but that's a big challenge. And to do so, it's not enough to speak the procurement language of category savings, but procurement function needs to learn to speak and articulate in terms of sustainability, diversity, risk language, and so forth. So that's a challenge. But now let's focus and deep dive a bit on the data and regulations.
Samuli, I know that the data foundation is the whole topic of this presentation, but before we go there, I just wanted to ask, maybe from your experience and networking, how do you think the procurement leaders feel about this broadened mandate? Do they have an action plan on the table? What's the sentiment?
That's a great question. I think by and large, the most, and I'm in nice position, I get to exchange with hundreds of CPOs on a regular basis, so I get good view across, let's say, industries and regions and so forth. I think the common thread is everybody has recognized these new challenges, so everybody recognizes that. The challenge people have is that there's just so much to do, and at the same time the resources are not growing at the same pace, especially when the macroeconomic situation is quite challenging. So I think that's sort of the dilemma that a lot of the audience has.
Weem in the chat is also adding that, and that's the opinion that I have heard on some procurement forums that I've attended, that procurement has too small influence in the board meeting. So perhaps this broadened mandate is yet to be recognized in some organizations. So that definitely adds up to the lack of resources to exercise this mandate.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely kind of one question: how well procurement is recognized in top leader decision making. But I absolutely agree. Kind of this, the wider mandate is one way to get there. Then at the same time, and this is perhaps now with black and white position, I think position in the boards and top management teams is earned. It's not given. So I think it's also up for procurement teams to really prove through their actions and behavior that they can bring this value. And if you do that in a consistent manner, I think eventually the position will be also given. But I don't want to speak for too long on this theory stuff because Sergey has something much more interesting to show. So I think this is my perhaps last or second last slide before we let Sergey go. But I think it's quite important. When we look at the data, I think we need to be a bit more analytical and nuanced about what kind of data there is. And for me, this is one of the frameworks which is really helpful. There's structured data. That's the data that fits in columns and database tables and Excels and whatnot. And then there's unstructured data, the RFP documents, the contracts, even the video meetings with the suppliers and so forth. And there's internal data that you own in your systems. And then there's external data, all data which is in internet by data provider partners and so forth. And of course, the traditional analytics has focused on this, the structured internal data, purchase order, material master, and so forth. Of course, there's been, let's say, a lot of internal unstructured data, but it's mainly been just kind of collected and it's been there. There's external structured data. In the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of, let's say, new providers who provide data around suppliers, risks, commodity prices, and so forth. And finally, there's the entire internet, basically, that's available. In the past, and also when Sievo started, it was all about this structured internal data. We provided, and you had to challenge, how do you process all of this structured internal data? Now, in the last 5 years, what has changed? You have a lot of these external data providers, you can capture that. But now what has really changed, and I think ChatGPT is the famous example, suddenly all of this external unstructured data is also available for companies and decision making. Now we can capture and process the entire internet and use that data for our analytics as well. And of course, that's not only the external unstructured data, it's also the internal unstructured data is now available for the decision making. So if like 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, most of the analytics was about this, or perhaps this internal external data, now suddenly we can use all of this unstructured data as a basis for decision making as well. And the point here is that I believe that internal structured data represents only like 1% of all data relevant to decision making. And in the past, trying to do anything else has required human attention. Somebody go and read the document, somebody go and Google and look at the stuff and combine that with the internal data in their head or Excel or something like that. This is changing drastically. Suddenly now we have all of this data available for decision making. And that will change how we process data, but also how we make procurement decisions and actions. And this is where I'll hand over to Sergey to do the tough job of actually trying to explain how this works in practice.
That's the best part of the job, Sammeli. While I'm starting to share my screen, in your opinion, the availability of new technology, does that mean that the business of external data providers is growing and expanding, or should the companies not in software business start nurturing expertise in-house to process that unstructured data?
Yeah, kind of great question. I use an analogy from Google. My mother, 79 years, not exactly a software engineer, she can Google pretty damn well, but she's not kind of search algorithm specialist. And I think the same is going to happen to any access to this external data. People will learn and be able to use these external data sets by ChatGPT or by third-party providers and so forth without becoming these sort of data science experts. So actually, the rise of these large language models and AI does not mean that most companies should invest heavily in those capabilities. It actually means that those capabilities will become available to us as consumers, as users, embedded in a lot of the solutions that there are out there. So that's my view. Large enterprises should invest in data science only for data sets which are very specific to their business or their industry.
I think this applies not only to a large business, but also basically any operational business, including ours. So I think that's very much the thinking process that we've been using internally on seeing where we should simply consume ready-made solutions and where we should build the expertise or build a solution in-house. But I'll get to that in a moment. Thank you for the inspiring introduction. I think so far we've been warming up the audience about the broad mandate of procurement that this whole group is very excited about. But I think we only touched on the motivation of why the webinar today is the right moment and right place to be, and why we believe that this is about to change. I think this is quite a bold statement there, that from now on, the 99% of remaining data becomes more accessible. I find a very straightforward explanation to this. I think that the AI in procurement story is not new. I mean, we published a book in 2019 about AI in procurement, we at Sievo. And I think historically, we have been delegating tasks to AI whenever we believed that the AI would do an impeccable job at it. I think we are quite conservative as decision makers, quite risk averse as decision makers who adopt new technology. So it is very natural for us to delegate the task where we believe that it will be done perfectly. Now, over the last 18 months or so, most of us have experienced ChatGPT and other solutions of the kind. And I think it's hard to argue that they have become very convincing. They are convincing me that we can delegate certain tasks related to natural language processing, to generating natural language. And if you think about it, a lot of our work, a lot of procurement work is about working with language in technical terms. So that's why the enthusiasm around GenAI, we perceive not just as another hype wave, but as a true opportunity, and putting here a bold word, revolution, that we as a company and as a software platform embrace through several mechanisms. On the one hand, we do strive to use the generic AI solutions that exist out there to boost our own efficiency, but then more importantly, we propagate the value and the enablement that this GenAI technology provides to our customers and partners by making it part of Sievo offering. So ever since we decided that this would play a decisive role in procurement, we've been making this assessment of the traditional build versus buy, except that in our case, the buy is also split into integrate and develop. And the focus of today's examples is, of course, on the use cases that we decided to prioritize and make part of Sievo offering. And without further delay, I would like to dive in the first one. It is a true story about inventory management. Actually, to be fair, I think it's an almost true story because I made up almost everything on this slide, like the name of the materials, the prices and everything. But the gist of it is true, and I have heard it more than once. I'm sure many of you can relate. Please write in the comments if you do. Let's think about a large industrial machinery manufacturing company. And unfortunately, I'm not an expert, but let's imagine that this company really needs this hydraulic pump as part of the manufacturing process. And the company happens to be really large, and different geographical units have quite high autonomy in their production processes. So there is one unit that sources this hydraulic pump from 3 suppliers. Fair enough, they would like to diversify at an average price of 175 euros. All good. The other geographical unit is sourcing exactly same material, But in their system, it is stored under a local name in a local language. And it's a single source material, and it's slightly cheaper. Now, what the central operation of this global company would like is that whenever there is a shortage or a surplus of this material at stock, they would like to exchange it internally rather than replenishing it via external suppliers. But then the issue becomes that simply because these two small, seemingly meaningless lines of text, they do not exactly match. So they cannot do VLOOKUP, they cannot do left join, they cannot even do any regex because these are different languages. And then it goes even more difficult because there is unit number 3 and unit number 4, and they all source from different suppliers, or maybe the same. They don't really know because the names of the materials do not match. So one of the versions of the story that I heard is that some teams, they realized that the material looks the same. So they went to the lengths of sending images in a WhatsApp group to each other to understand if the inventory is high enough of a certain material. And we are bringing this as the first example on how the new technology that became available not so long ago can help us solve this challenge at scale. I know that the manual alternative to it is recruit a team of people to really go through these descriptions and say that this is the same hydraulic pump. It's not a trivial conclusion, or it's not a difficult conclusion to make when you have a human being looking at it. What we are proposing instead, and what we have developed now, easier shown than said, what is happening here on the screen, on the left-hand side, you can see the original descriptions, the hydraulic pumps or the front labels of an imaginary demo company. On the right-hand side, we've got the output of AI-powered material harmonization service that we developed in-house for this particular use case. You can see that this is really not rocket science. There is a description that says, this is the product, and then these are the specifications, the width, the length, the model number, and we are able to take this and distinguish the two, saying that this would be the clean name of the material, and these would be the technical attributes if we need to go to the length of comparing the prices, for instance. In more traditional slide form, this is an illustration of what AI-powered material harmonization is all about. Here on the right-hand side, we have the original descriptions. They don't need to match. They just need to be somewhat interpretable in plain language. And then going through the AI-powered system, we receive 2 layers of harmonization. First of all, saying that all of these 4 materials seem to be hydraulic pumps. And secondly, claiming that there are actually 2 versions of hydraulic pumps that these plants are buying. So if you want fully apples to apples comparison, we no longer need to rely on exactly matching descriptions. We can use these enriched fields instead. And this is a success story that we are now publishing in the first half of 2024. We have already done successful pilots with our existing customers. So if you're in the audience, thank you for collaborating with us on that. I'm in a single screen setup. Samuel, do you see any reaction from the audience or any questions?
There's a kind of questions, there's comments, there's discussion. Somebody was sort of stating that he or she couldn't see the demo, but perhaps hopefully most of the people saw it. One question I have is that what you are saying is 5 to 15% deduplication. So what you are saying that if you take large enterprise, we run 100,000 SKUs that they have. In typical case, we are able to identify 5,000 to 15,000 duplicate sort of materials, and then of course use that to better inventory management, but also better sourcing and so forth. Is that the point?
Exactly. If we follow the 100,000 SKUs example, we feed in 100,000 descriptions, and as an output, we are claiming that there are actually 85,000 distinct products that they are sourcing, and the rest of the numbers are just due to different languages, different spellings. Maybe they are just even exactly matching duplicates, but that's the conclusion.
The next question I have is a bit more technical from Valentina. Thanks. How does AI do better task like this compared to fuzzy matching?
Yep. I think the answer to this would also pop up in the upcoming sections of our presentation. It is true that one could implement a fuzzy matching algorithm for that purpose, and that's how it was attempted historically, and it produced reasonable results. Now, since in the example before and in the pilots that we executed, a lot of the descriptions are plain language descriptions that can be interpreted by a human being. Today, we can also leverage language models that are able to parse these words, put them in the context of overall data environment, and this allows us to basically boost the deduplication rate that we are able to detect in the customer data sets. So compared to more naive or more traditional approaches that do not leverage large language models, we are seeing less harmonization. And I could actually quantify that. So in our pipeline, when we executed the pipeline, the pilots, if we take the 15% deduplication as the basis, usually it was additional 3 to 4% deduplication that resulted after applying the more sophisticated ensemble techniques mentioned here on the slide.
Yeah. Now looking at the clock, there's a lot of questions, but I insist we go on because we've gone 1 out of our 5 examples.
Yeah.
so let's move forward.
Exactly. Let's do that. Now, the first example was about SKUs. The next example is, in my opinion, even more exciting because it has to do with a real partner of ours or of our customers, with the suppliers. I think suppliers are often neglected as part of the story when we talk about procurement analytics or spend analysis. So hereby correcting that wrong. And this one is about supplier intelligence. Now, for those of you in the audience who are existing Sievo customers or who have ever seen a demo of Sievo or any other spend analysis solution, what you can now see on the right-hand side is the traditional analytics view, the dashboard view based on internal spend data. And what I see here is already amazing. I see that there is a supplier that is called Ardak, and it is 6th largest supplier here, a lot of money in annual spend, all of it PO covered, and so on. But then, I mean, it's 6th largest supplier, so I should really know better, but shame on me, it doesn't really ring a bell. Well, now I realize that I have seen this logo somewhere, but what does this company actually do? Okay, it is a producer of glass and metal products, so now it makes sense that most of the spend with this supplier is metal and glass. Now, I'm reviewing this profile. I just joined the packaging category management team. I'm not, is this the right partner for us? At least they set the emission reduction targets, which is a very big deal in our packaging category. So I guess you see that with this very naive example, what I mean is that all of this information is easily available in place number 1, place number 2, place number 3, but then the GenAI tools allow us to crawl all of those places efficiently and summarize all of this information, not only in some central repository, but in the place where it matters most, right next to internal data assets, truly combining the two, showing simple things like logo, SBTI commitments, descriptions, and beyond. So this is just an illustrative example, but what this enables us to do is much, much more than that. Samali, are you excited about the possibility of driving supplier intelligence with AI?
I am, and I think there's a couple of perspectives here. Sort of pretty much all companies in the world are managing their vendor master, but then at the same time, it's same information for pretty much for all the companies. Everybody's interested about the address information. Everybody's interested about science-based targets, about where the production is, whether the supplier has ISO certificate and so forth. Somehow the demands changed by category, but nevertheless, it's the same information. Now, what I do believe that instead of all companies managing their vendor master themselves, players like Sievo will sort of come up who will take care of the supplier data creating on behalf of you. We process 1% of global GDP. We have a supplier database with 12 million different entries. So we are much better positioned to manage your vendor master data than you are, and then bring this in external information in. This is not true for something like bill of materials, which is very specific to your company. You need to manage that. but this generic supplier information is something that you can and should outsource to somebody like us. But really even more excited I'm about the capability to combine internal and external info. Because imagine if we have all of this external information on suppliers. Imagine if we have production, or they have production in Malaysia, and there's an earthquake in Malaysia. Now we can not only notify you about that, but we can notify that you have 5 suppliers who have production in Malaysia. Some of them are single source suppliers, some of them are not, and then you can drive right insights based on that information on an automated basis. So it's not only about collecting supplier information, it's about telling the implication to you in real time.
That was great. Now I can see you are truly excited.
Yeah.
I am convinced. Let's move on to the third example on the data crunching side of the things. And then I will let somebody explain why all of this is much more than just a dashboard. And now this one is about spend classification. I trust that most of you understand what spend classification challenge is. And I did a webinar on AI in procurement 4 years ago, and spend classification was my strongest card at that time. So some of you may think, really, are they pushing this again? Since training data becomes available and then we leverage AI to classify the tail, this story is very well known to most of us. And it is true that in the past, now what you see on the screen on the left-hand side is the traditional view on the classification challenge. The bottom screenshot is a collection of data points, most of them textual, vendor name, account name, material group. Some of these can be correct data points, some of them can be incorrectly assigned. And then we would have a hierarchy, a taxonomy of some 300 or 400 nodes and 4 levels, and we would need to classify the spend with high enough accuracy so that our customers can make better sourcing decisions based on that. And we have developed amazing tools. We have developed a proprietary AI approach to learn from user feedback, to classify tail transactions automatically. But this time it actually is different. And to explain how it is different, I need to introduce one definition. This is not a textbook definition. This is just my way of explaining it. So let's take a step back and let's agree that transformer large language models are models that have been trained by someone else than us. We don't need to do the training anymore. And they were trained on some other data. So we don't need to curate that either, with purpose to understand and interpret text. And now if you look back at the left-hand side, you would agree that spend classification is largely a text reading and interpretation problem. We need to read through all of these descriptions, make sense of which one is most reliable, and then find a good match in the category. And historically, we relied that there would be a human who would approve such a classification decision and say, yes, this actually makes sense. Now, today, the transformer large language models that can read and interpret the text for us not only exist as a technology, but they also become commodities. So this screenshot is actually a website on the web where anyone, including myself or yourselves, can go and download a large language model on a laptop and then look inside, understand how it works, and even launch it on some text. What it means for us as a business or as a data processor is that instead of passing this structured data in the bottom left side, a lot of textual descriptions through the amazing tools that we have built, we let the LLM take the first stab. And what we receive as the result is a collection of suggestions. Before any human being saw the data for the first time, we already see the suggestions on the screen. And this is not just a theoretical concept or idea in our minds. So let me show you. There is actually a button for our consultants to use. And this is what they're doing now here in this animation. They are selecting that they would like to receive AI suggestions for SAP R3 data source. They are selecting the data points. I edited out 20 minutes of calculation, if you allow that. And then in another UI of ours, instead of starting from scratch in a structured way, we start with the suggestions that are generated by AI. One thing I wanted to add to this example, I need to do that. When we first released the service, many colleagues of mine were asking me, Sergey, now is this GenAI? And not without frustration, I kept telling that there is nothing to generate here. So it is a large language model, but it is not GenAI. But actually, a week and a half ago, my team concluded an experiment where we generated synthetic data for 12 industries. We generated synthetic taxonomies for those 12 industries, and we tuned this large language model on that synthetic data, and that gave us 1.5 to 2 times boost to the accuracy of these suggestions out of thin air. So now I need to go and apologize to all of the colleagues and say, no, we actually use GenAI in our classification approach today.
That was a lot of stuff, and I guess one of the points here that this is all live already and in the use. A lot of the people were asking there about, but how about my data security and what can I give to LLMs and whatnot? I'm sure we could fill entire webinar on that topic specifically, but perhaps very quick comment from your side.
Oh, that was, I had this question in my pocket for you, Sammeli. That's quite a turn of events. Well, I cannot comment since this question came up on this service. I think the part where we claim that the models that we can leverage, we and you can leverage, not necessarily as part of Sievo solution, they don't even have to be trained on your own data. So they can be trained on some other publicly available data, or as in my most recent example, even on synthetic data. So one part of the answer is that in order to be as conservative as possible, in order to chip in and start using the service, there is even no need to expose your own data to a service like this. The other hand, most of these models also support so-called tuning. It is not training from scratch, but it is tuning it to a customer context. And we do that as well. So in this animation, actually, if some of the spend is classified, we're able to tune the model to a data that has already been classified in this particular demo environment. But in this case, it will be the smaller version of the model that will only reside in this particular customer context. So yes, there are ways to train models on data that is shared voluntarily or otherwise publicly available. There are also ways to leverage this technology without exposing sensitive data to the model for training.
And that I agree. Then also another perspective I would like to add, it's also kind of in some ways you need to balance the risk of, okay, what is the worst case if you share the data? But I would also say if you don't embrace the AI revolution, you'll be so slow that competition eats you alive. So I think there's a certain level of risk that should be just accepted, because the other side of the risk is even bigger. And also in some ways I find it odd that pretty much all large companies have decided to trust their data for Microsoft Azure or Amazon AWS and so forth. So that data is already by those large companies. But now suddenly when you have the AI, people feel very reluctant not to share the data in the same way. So I think there's also a learning process for us as business owners, sort of what are the risks really and how do we address them. But now we have only 20 minutes and we have still a lot of examples, so we need to march forward.
Yes, what do we do with the classified and harmonized data and supplier logo?
It's my turn now, and now I think I need to share the screen again, and then I need to go through all of these slides that you had. Just a moment. Now, I'm co-founder and CEO of Procurement Analytics company. So it may be surprising, but I believe analytics has zero value. It's the actions that drive the value. And our job, your job, is to use data to create actions. Before actions, you have a decision. And for the last 20 years, we've been creating analytics, we've been creating dashboards that help you to make the right decision. And there's been a human input required, and we've tried to narrow that gap. But fundamentally, as far as we were able to process only 1% of the data, there was a lot of human decision, human input required. What we now claim that with access to more data and access to capability to process in automated fashion more of this unstructured data, in many cases we can close that gap first by providing decision support, still leaving the decision for humans, but in certain cases automating the decision. And whenever I say that, I get all the questions. How about the data decision quality? And can you trust the AI? And what about the hallucination and so forth? you are wrong with those questions. You are focusing on wrong aspect of automated decision making if you have those questions in your mind, because automated decision making is about something else. And let me share my provocative view. Automating decision making is vastly different in a couple of ways that we humans just cannot compete. If you take a lazy person like Sammeli, I can do 1 decision per day and it's a good day. 2 at the max. An automated decision making can make 1 million decisions per day. And of course, the flip side of that coin is the cost per decision is fundamentally different. It's a fraction of a fraction. And also a lazy person like Sammeli has 17% uptime, whereas of course the software has 99.99999. So the question is really not whether I can do as a human better decisions than machine. The question is that when you have a decision-making system that's 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 times less expensive, how do you want to deploy that? And then, of course, when you take that perspective, you start to see the picture. As of today, as procurement professionals, we take those decisions which are high at value and which have relatively low decision and implementation complexity. We segment our suppliers because we can only focus on the most strategic ones. We focus on the biggest opportunities because we don't have the bandwidth to execute all opportunities. Show me a category manager who hasn't gone through the prioritization exercise because they need to focus where the value or risk is. Yes, automated decision making will replace some of the simple human decision making because whatever can be automated will be automated. But more importantly, it will expand the scope of decision making to the long tail of boring decisions that we as humans don't want to take today because that decision making takes time and cost. So the true value of automated decision making is not replacing us humans. It is addressing that long tail of decision. If you have 30,000 SKUs in 20 plants, 50,000 suppliers, there's a lot of decision points that you just can't do today as humans. But if we get the human off the loop, we can unlock a lot of value. The third component is urgent decision making. You know, this US Army, they have these naval carrier ships where the I should have a jet here, where the jets sort of land and take off. If you shoot 1 missile on such a carrier, it will be semi-automated defense system, human and machine. If you shoot 100 missiles, it's such a chaotic situation that no human can take down 100 missiles. The system goes on autopilot. Same needs to happen with supply chains. When there's a next Suez Canal crisis and everything is in chaos, we should stop calling our suppliers and try to figure out what's happening. Then we need to let the system go on autopilot because there's too much information for us to process. So long tail urgent decisions, that's where the automation will hit us and give us a value. So I think really the question is, data-driven procurement is not about better decisions. We've been hearing about this mantra for 20 years. Give us data, it gives us better decisions. Yes, that's part of value. But the real point is about faster decisions and more of them. What are the decisions we are not doing today that we could automate? That's where the value is. What are the decisions we are not doing today that we could automate? That's where the data and analytics gives value. And now comes the real interesting stuff of this webinar. I congratulate, most people have hanged on this webinar for 45 minutes, and it's only now that we reveal the best part of the box. So over to you, Sergey.
Thank you, Sammeli. I can feel the tension in the air about now doing a reality check on some of the statements here. So far we are talking about more decisions, faster decisions, decision automation, but the examples that we have shared have been on the harmonized material classified spend side, which is amazing. And as I'm glad that somebody reminded us that better decisions is still in the game. And actually everything that we have discussed so far is still a prerequisite to adequate automated decision making. But now let me start this example here with a collection of screenshots that have nothing to do with procurement. These are the tools that surround us day-to-day basis. Every evening, every day, we listen to music on different platforms. We do our shopping on e-commerce platforms. We sometimes, unfortunately, spend too much time on social media or streaming some documentaries or TV series on the streaming platforms. Now, I don't know how about you, but for me, choosing a movie has already been, or has always been, a very painful process. And it's that moment in time when I go to IMDb top 100, that's when I know that there will be no movie tonight, because that project is already dead. I think these platforms, admittedly not for me, but for most people, these platforms solve the problem of choosing the right movie because they already know what we would be interested in. Netflix knows our preferences and does a really good job at predicting what kind of TV series we would enjoy next. Now, these are consumer examples of recommendation systems and platforms. Then my question is, why do we make our users start their movie search from 5 billion total global spend in 2019 year to date with 76% PO coverage? I don't think that this is the road to automated decisions, more decisions and faster decisions. This is a road to IMDb top 100, not a movie night anymore. So the concept that we have been working on and that we are piloting now with selected customers is a hub of insights that would already know what is relevant for the user, semi-automated and ultimately automated proposals of what action could be taken based on this recommendation. So I'm not sure if the screenshot is too small, but here, if we go through the anatomy of this, on the left-hand side, we get a feed, same as we have the social media feed. We have a feed of recommendations that are generated by the system. The recommendation itself is generated in plain language form. So if anyone feels like doing the dashboard stuff, it is still available. Even more, we even allow the users to create and share their own dashboards, which is very cool. But we still believe that this is the leap in the right direction. Crisp summary. This is what the system identified as a savings opportunity or as a carbon reduction opportunity. And here is what we suggest that you can do. You can contact a supplier, you can create an initiative, or you can launch a Negobot. Samuli, do you have something to add to this vision?
Thank you. And I kind of, because if you take the previous slide, and I think this is quite fundamental, because the left-hand side is the traditional analytics. It's the top-down, drill-down stuff where a human needs to come and process the data. On the right-hand side is more kind of alert up system. You will get these opportunities, you will get risk about the supplier in Malaysia and so forth. And suddenly the role of the analytics is not only to provide the cleansed data. You still need to cleanse data to do the right-hand side, but the role of the analytics is to provide those recommendations, let the user act, and ultimately automate this long boring tail of actions. So there's some questions around why wouldn't I do this with Power BI? Perhaps the left-hand side you can do. I would even argue that it will be very difficult. But the right-hand side, where we start to see analytics as an action orchestration engine. It's not about analytics, it's about actions. The role of data and analytics is to drive and trigger these actions in orchestrated manner. And that's quite different view on what the analytics is. And my challenge is that I have 400 people in Sievo who believe analytics is about dashboards, and they've been spending 20 years to try to perfect what shade of blue should that bar be, and what is the font size, and whether I should have round rectangles. That's not the future of the analytics. The future of the analytics is action orchestration on the right-hand side. And let's speak about how to really make those actions in an automated way.
Yes, let's do that. I must admit I'm flushing red here because I spent my deal of time searching for the perfect shade of blue for the POC presentation. But there was good time and place for that. Let's agree that now we are talking about new ways of working because new technology is available. So we are not crossing out the history and the dashboard. As said, it's still the basis that remains accessible and usable. We did mention a Negobot here as the last item, and actually an attentive listener might notice that the actions tab here is all disabled. So how do we again claim more actions and faster actions if this is still at the recommendation stage? Well, the good news is we are concepting orchestration of actions, and there is a good reason why this light blue background collection of buttons takes such a dominating place on the screen. And one of the steps in that direction is the integration with our newly announced partner, Pactum. And it is a NegoBot solution. By pressing the button, it will send it to the system to take forward. And then there's an overview of negotiations happening on behalf of our users. Now, I would argue that PepsiCo with 60 million of spend is not the kind of supplier that we would like to delegate to a NegoBot. But if we imagine a supplier that would be slightly smaller or more on the tail side, that would never make it to the list of priorities that somebody referred to previously, then we start talking about really automating the actions. And then you might have noticed a checkbox somewhere around there, or maybe it was a different screenshot, but basically launching those at scale and launching those at a predefined set of rules instead of manually approving each and every step in the negotiation process. That is something that can drive the value at unprecedented rate and scale.
Exactly. To make it concrete, let's say the steel market price crashes. There will be certain SKUs that have a strong steel component, but it will be a long tail of suppliers and SKUs. But now what the system can do, it can create you a recommendation that because steel price goes down, these 15,000 SKUs or these 3,000 suppliers that kind of should be able to lower their prices because the cost structure is changing. You don't want to engage with NegoBots for the top 10% of your suppliers, but for the long tail, you just choose that pool of, let's say, negotiations, you launch that, and then you are able to capture those kind of opportunities at scale and at low cost. And this actually means that some part of your sourcing becomes not a, let's say, quarterly annual exercise, but it becomes a continuous activity because you can streamline the insights, but also the action side. So I think we are finding a very exciting future ahead of us.
Absolutely. Thank you for this. Now, with this statement, these have been the 5 concrete examples of how GenAI is changing procurement today and tomorrow. And that means that we are arriving at the 6th example of how GenAI is shaping procurement today and tomorrow, because at Sievo, exceed is one of our corporate values, and there was so much great stuff to share that we could not fit it in the 5. Now, for this example, I need to refer to the current state of our solution once again. And for those of you who are new to Sievo, this is the place where we let the users do the heavy lifting and do the data crunching on their own. Here on the left-hand side, they select what they would like to see. They choose if they would like a bar chart, a pie chart, any type of visualization they want. And now we see that this user has generated a table of material purchases in 2023, and then we have price and quantity and spend. And now this is the goal of this exercise is probably to identify some volatile materials or substantial price deviations quarter on quarter. So this would be a dead end for most people who don't feel like doing data crunching in Excel, either because they have higher priority tasks to do, or it's not at the core of their expertise. Now, remember what we shared earlier about enabling people, regardless of their analytical background, of doing the heavy lifting. We recently piloted a beta version of this GenAI self-service assistant. Now it is confirming that it has received the data, it has seen the columns, and we are asking for top 5 materials with most volatile price. And now, admittedly, I did cut out about 60 seconds of computation time. Arguably, this is still faster than most humans would do exporting this to Excel. And look, it can even tell a procurement joke better than I would. I'm not a very good joke teller. If you did not see that, it was about bringing a ladder to negotiation so that we could take the discussions to the next level. I think now this has been the list of examples we wanted to share. Even that list is not exhaustive. On my behalf, I would like to summarize that today we have discussed the role of AI as it emerged over the last couple of years, and GenAI in particular, first to enable the data crunching that was not possible previously, to process vast amount of unstructured data, and second, to get to the end game, to the action automation, making faster actions and making more of them. If you enjoyed this webinar, like and subscribe. Sammeli will walk you through the practicalities.